Funding for Chasing the Dream is provided by JPB Foundation and the Ford Foundation.
Chasing the dream of financial security and closing the Columbus income gap. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Rachel Cleet, Head of Regional Planning at OSU's School of Architecture. Beth Gifford, President and CEO of Columbus Works. Michael Wilkos, Vice President of Community Impact at the United Way of Central Ohio. And Ellen Moss-Williams, President and CEO of the Godman Guild. This week, we take a break from day-to-day politics to focus on an ongoing and a growing problem, income inequality. In a project called Chasing the Dream, WOSU and other public media organizations around the country are looking at the issue of poverty and opportunity in America. It's an in-depth look at the current state of the American dream, the changing nature of jobs, the vanishing middle class, wage disparity, and economic opportunity. Here in Columbus, we have one of the largest income gaps in the country. While things are great for many others, just paying day-to-day expenses and getting to work is tough.
You know, there's rent, there's utilities, there's car payments, there's insurance, there's gas you put in your car to go back and forth to work, there's food. Even though I'm out there working and it looks like I should be banking, I'm struggling. I'm past struggling right now.
I do need another space, a bigger place.
What's keeping you from moving up?
Money. I don't have the income that I should. I don't work. My job is taking care of my son.
So you've got quite a few buses. You have to take 3 buses, right, to get to work?
Yes.
So tell me about that, how long it takes.
About an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half.
Plus it's extra babysitting expenses.
Yes. Yeah, you got to pay the babysitter. So if I'm only working 5 hours a day, I end up paying for 8 hours of childcare. Majority of my money goes towards the childcare and a bus pass. And then the rest will go on utilities and food or whatever I need for the house or for my kids.
You just have to do what you got to do.
Doing what they have to do, and they still can't seem to get ahead. Helping people achieve financial security is a complex problem, and we'll try to find some solutions during the next 25 minutes or so. Ellen Moss-Williams, you're in the front lines at the Godman Guild. Yes. What do you see as the primary reason why people can't get ahead?
Well, first of all, it is generational. We have generations of families that have been used to trying to get by. And today, in this information age, there is a big disparity between those that have information and those that do not. And it's only widening as we sit here today. So everything that I've heard from those individuals that just spoke is what we experience at the Guild. They're trying to get a job, they're trying to get to that job, they're trying to take care of all the things that are complex in their lives, and it's just very difficult for them to do.
And that's part of the problem with this issue is it's just there's so many issues that are intertwined. You can't just solve one thing. You have to look at, Michael, you have to look at a lot of different things and try to piece it all together.
I think we have a structural problem, though. So, I mean, for years it's been very clear that our economy is producing a certain kind of job. Or, let me say this, we have a huge growth on the bottom end of our wage scale of jobs. And we have some growth on the top end. And to get those top jobs, you need to have at least some college. Even a year of college helps you to get a better paying job. But most of the jobs are not good, and they're not paying well. And it seems, so it's structural in our economy right now. Of course, there's been a transformation over generation in the kinds of occupations that you can get with a high school degree. Manufacturing has left the city, as the series says. So it's the problem of creating good jobs and creating ladders for those jobs is very difficult. But without that structure, we're going to be in this situation.
Beth, Columbus Works, you're trying to find people jobs. Are there jobs in the middle? I mean, are those just few and far between? There aren't any jobs in the middle, or how few are there?
Actually, there are more jobs than there are people. Actually, employers are experiencing labor shortage. The labor participation rate is at a low not seen since World War II. The problem are the barriers that folks are experiencing in sustaining employment. In the story that we just saw, the individual who is commuting an hour and 15 minutes one way, so twice a day to work, that is a very real problem. Transportation to the jobs that are paying well in Columbus, folks really are stranded in Central Ohio, so to speak. The other problem is that these jobs, these entry-level jobs, were never really intended to be the job that sustained a family. They were meant to be part-time jobs or a second job. But now, because of the vacuum created by the changes in the industrial mix or the service sector, we now have folks trying to make it on those entry-level jobs.
Michael, we hear about this skills gap. I mean, but it's always there, or it has been there for several years. How real is it, and how do we get the folks who have these low-paying jobs into these jobs that employers want?
So I think there's several things. Let me back up that line of question a little bit. I think there's something that we first need to acknowledge, and that is this economy just feels very different than those in the past, in that typically when we would have low unemployment or we'd be creating a lot of jobs, most of us that work in the health and human and social service sector would just feel better about the economy. So I think we just need to acknowledge that the economy is just structurally different. So recently we were just looking at stuff in the near North Side neighborhoods, and there's a whole series of businesses from Columbus Auto Parts, Columbus Coated Fabrics, 3M, even Lennox Air Conditioning, which is where the old Lennox, which is now where the Target is at Lennox, and several other manufacturers. And many of those were still in business between the early 1990s up until 2001. So Columbus really lost a number of those good paying manufacturing jobs much later than, say, the Youngstowns in Dayton and Akron. So I think we're still kind of responding to those changes in the economy and the loss of those jobs. But because Columbus is a growing city, we look at those former industrial sites, and they've all been replaced by either luxury housing, not for families, but for individuals, the singles, or retail, and those jobs don't pay the same. So now we have this skills gap where we either have jobs that require a technical skill, meaning that you're doing something with your hands, right? Plumber, electrician, construction worker, or you need a college degree. Those jobs in the middle, many of those companies that I just mentioned, those were the jobs that have disappeared more recently, and there's not a replacement to those type of jobs that pay that living wage.
So Ellen, how do you get the person, I mean, this was years and years ago, who was working in one of these factories to get one of these technical jobs, or maybe the children of the factory worker to get them into the technical job?
Yeah, I was going to say that we're not really dealing with those older adult individuals, but when we look at the youth that we're working with, we're identifying the entry-level jobs that they can get into, specifically right now with healthcare at Ohio Health, and surveying the employer to say, what is it going to take to get them into those entry-level jobs? Once they get there, help us to construct the pathways that they need to get to those middle skill jobs where they can earn a living to sustain themselves. And that's what we've been doing.
Beth, are employers willing, are most employers willing to do that? In the past, you know, you went to work at the factory, you had an apprenticeship program. You started at the very bottom and you got trained, you got paid to get trained, you worked your way up. It doesn't seem like employers don't want to do that anymore.
Employers are willing because there is a labor shortage, so they are very willing to work with those folks who have the soft skills necessary. So they come to work every day, they know how to communicate in the workforce, they add value to their team. In fact, paid apprenticeship programs are coming back. So we have paid apprenticeship programs in the construction trades, paid apprenticeships in the laying data lines and electricians and the steel sheet metal workers. So these things are coming back, I'm really happy to say.
Rachel, are you seeing, is it like it was back in the 50s, or is the apprenticeship program, from your perspective, you're seeing this as many as
I guess
in the past?
The apprenticeship programs are becoming more plentiful, paid apprenticeship. What I worry about is who accesses them. And from the little I know about apprenticeship programs, is that they're very much by word of mouth. That your father does it or your cousin does it, and so then you do it. And so so I've been involved in some programs, not here, but other places, trying to introduce women into the trades, trying to introduce people of color into the trades. And so the question is really, if there are these better paying jobs that are through apprenticeship, who is getting them? And where are they located also? That's the other problem.
And that's one thing that we've learned throughout this year in surveying some of the entities that are serving the poor in the Columbus area, and that is that there is a disconnect from information, which it seems simple, but if you don't know about the programs.
So you have to be online, you have to have a
yes,
phone.
you can't get into them. And that's one of the things that we are working hard to do, is to get the information out to those people that need it.
And you know, employers are figuring that out. They have completely, it's a new economy, as Michael said, they have completely are beginning to change their talent acquisition strategy to get the word out, to partner more strategically with community programs, with folks like the Godman Guild, so that, and the Ohio Department of Education is doing some great work in getting the word out. But employers also recognize there's an information gap, and they're really willing to make some changes in how they get the word out.
Okay, let's drill down on some of these topics. Usually the biggest expense any family has is housing. An affordable home in a stable neighborhood is literally the foundation to building financial security. In Columbus, 3 things have happened in recent decades. Many people have moved farther and farther out to the suburbs. Some people have moved back into the city, revitalizing neighborhoods, which then forces low-income residents to have to move out. And then there are neighborhoods that are perpetually struggling. Linden, the South Side, the Hilltop. Rachel Cleet, let's start with those neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that always seem to be struggling. Why is that?
Well, we did this to ourselves. With the coming of the highway through the city, and with traditional redlining that started in the 30s and existed until the Fair Housing Act in '68, and still was practiced actually in many ways, we saw a lack of investment capital in these neighborhoods. And so people who wanted to purchase in these neighborhoods literally could not get loans. There was a story of one person I heard about in the Near East Side who, like 40 years ago, was given a loan by an individual to buy the house. And that person held the mortgage for them so they could purchase their house. So we have and that lack of capital has fostered a vision or an interpretation of these places as negative places. Because if you don't have investment, you don't have people keeping up their yards, you don't have new people coming in, and you can't get a loan to fix your house, for example, right? A lot of people have with home equity lines. How do you get a home equity line if people aren't lending there? And so we're still feeling the results of that generation or generations of bias in lending.
Luckily, you've worked a lot on housing, both in United Way and when you worked with Campus Partners in the Wineland Park area. Yes. How do you get people to invest in the perpetually struggling neighborhoods? I mean, Wineland Park was one of those.
So, I mean, Wineland Park wasn't always a struggling neighborhood. I mean, for the first 50 years of its existence, it really was a neighborhood that had a lot of income diversity, but it never really had a lot of diversity with its housing stock, right? So a neighborhood that has approximately the same size of houses that are all basically 2-story homes are going to appeal to a certain kind of family, which means a starter family, meaning starting out on the income ladder, and one that's not a very large family. So there's a couple issues. If your family grows and you now have a number of children, the housing stock in Wineland Park doesn't necessarily support large families. And let's say if you're aging in place in your neighborhood and a 2-story home where the only full bathroom is on the 2nd floor and the only bedroom is on the 2nd floor, that may not be a good match for you. So part of it is, as our historic neighborhoods age, are we also renovating and updating the housing stock that gives people the options of housing typology so they can stay in the neighborhood and they can have a housing product that matches where they are in that continuum? I think more recently in Wineland Park, we have done everything we can as a city to really bring a variety of different housing interventions to bear in the neighborhood. What that has resulted in as a large number of housing options for people really on the lower end of the economic spectrum, those that are getting either a federal or a state subsidy with their housing, and then we're allowing the private market to come in because we wanted to have a mixed income neighborhood, and that part of the market was missing. And so now Wineland Park is getting a little bit more of kind of the bookends. Yeah. It's that middle ring of housing that's hard to get to.
Well, I mean, Wineland Park is still a work in progress, but it's shown some progress, but it's taken a lot of work and a lot of money. Can it be replicated, feasibly? Can we do that in other neighborhoods like Linden or the Hilltop or the South Side?
There needs to be some adaptation because Wineland Park is a very small footprint, and it's easy to kind of control what's going on there. I would say that the South Side and Linden are going to take a lot more work, a lot more thought about housing, a lot more thought about how to get people to programs and services. Economic development, I think, is key. Yeah. It might be missing in a lot of places, but you've got to stimulate the economy as well.
The city gives tax abatements to the Short North, Victorian Village, and they've been successful. Those neighborhoods were down at one point. They've come back. Is it time to really intensify the tax abatements and the help for Linden, the South Side, the Hilltop? Would you say?
You know, I'm from the South Side. Grew up on the South Side, and the other day I actually drove past my it was a junior high school then, so I'll age myself a little bit, and where my elementary school was, my old neighborhood, drove through there, and it looks about the same as it did when I was growing up. Absent Buckeye Steel, Federal Glass, my brother still works on the South Side of Marion Road, where he's worked for, I won't say how long because he might hear this and be offended. Yeah. I don't think that the South Side should still look the way it did decades ago. I just am sharing that anecdotally to say we haven't seen much change. And I think we could say the same for the Hilltop. I think we could say the same for Linden. That it's been decades without the type of attention that it should have.
Ellen, would the tax abatement zone in Linden, I know there are some community programs in these neighborhoods. It's not totally devoid, but would it encourage investors to build a new apartment complex there with, mixed income housing or low income housing? Would that be enough?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It seems very complicated to me. What I do think, though, is that we need more projects like Rogue Fitness that bring jobs.
The manufacturing of fitness equipment, yeah.
Yes. And to go along with that, though, preparing those people in those neighborhoods in advance of those jobs coming into the neighborhoods is going to be important.
One quick question on gentrification, Michael. The problem is, and we've seen it in the work this week, is you fix up a neighborhood like Wyndham Park, and the folks who've been there a long time, they want to stay there, their tax bills go up, or if they're renting a place, then the rents go up. What can the city, what can the business community do to help those folks stay there if they want to?
So there's several responses. I first want to kind of go back to how do we take the lessons learned in Wyland Park and transfer some of those lessons to a place like the South Side or Linden. I do think that tax abatement is one tool, but there's going to have to be many tools that are going to be applied in these neighborhoods. And what I mean by that is that there needs to be a holistic logic model of what those interventions are going to look like. So there has to be an effort on education, employment, health, housing, safety, resident engagement, and positive youth development. There has to be a broad-based funder collaborative that works on these issues for a long time. Linden and the South Side did not get in their current state of distress quickly, and the solution to their success is not going to be quick. So let's talk about gentrification. You can probably count on one hand the number of neighborhoods in a market like Columbus that are experiencing what the common definition of gentrification might be, which is the rapid increase of housing prices that are displacing folks. I think Wyland Park has done a great job of protecting as many households as they can. Are there some people that will be vulnerable to the increase in, say, tax bills or increasing prices? Yes. So we have to look at solutions to keep some of those folks stable in their housing in the neighborhood, and a tax abatement on existing residents who are seeing an increase in value is one of those things.
See, some cities have like a pool. A lot of it's private money. Yes. So you set your tax rate at, let's say it's $3,000 a year, and it jumps to $6,000. That pool will cover the difference, or at least a portion of the difference. Right. Makes sense.
I was just thinking also about Wyland Park. I know that I've heard Michael talk about the kinds of housing investments that went into Wyland Park that are not usually focused on a single neighborhood. And in order to retain rental housing and affordable housing in Wyland Park, there are lots of deliberate resources that were spent locally, local resources. And that's, I think, the thing we don't have necessarily in these other neighborhoods is the commitment necessarily quite yet to say we're going to spend, I don't even know how much money it was on housing. You know how much it was on housing.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. To be able to connect people who are homeowners there with programs that allow them to fix up their homes from Central Ohio, or enable them to get access to money to repair, helping to connect landlords with those kinds of resources, investing money in long-term affordability. the way to deal with these, it's not only the homeowners that we need to worry about in terms of displacement, it's also the renters. And it's especially the renters.
Yeah, because they're the ones that move out first.
They're the ones who move out first.
Let's get to transportation. For most of us, we take transportation for granted. We may complain about traffic or gas prices, but getting to work takes no more thought than backing out of our driveways. For many in Central Ohio, it's not that easy, and it's an illustration of the area's economic divide. Take a look at these stats. 92% of whites in Columbus own a car, while only 80% of African Americans own a car. That means 1 in 5 African Americans in Columbus have to find another way to work. Often that means a COTA bus, where we found commute times as long as an hour and a half each way, usually for low-paying jobs. Beth Gifford, you're in the business of placing people in jobs. How many people have not been able to take a job or keep a job because they didn't have efficient, affordable transportation?
So I can't give you a number, but I can tell you affordable transportation is the #1 barrier to sustained employment that we see with our Columbus Works members. And also, I've been working with this population in human resources, the entry-level worker, for 30 years. And I can tell you it is the #1 barrier to sustained employment. I'm so thrilled that Columbus is growing and that we're experiencing an economic boom and people are bringing jobs here. But I'd like to see them located where transportation is affordable and readily available. The story that we had earlier where she walks an extra mile, not even on a sidewalk, that's not an anomaly. That's real. Yeah. And then if you're in a low-wage job, let's say you make $10 an hour and you do have a car, how do you keep a car running on $10 an hour? If you have to choose between your child playing sports or getting your radiator fixed, you know, it's a real dilemma. We really need to look at being happy about the new jobs coming, but where they're located and transportation to those jobs.
And transportation is not accommodating for a young mother with 2 or 3 kids that she has to get to daycare or childcare. And I don't know how we expect someone in the dead of winter to get up when it's dark, transport their kids through the snow on the sidewalk, maybe, and get to a job on time.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it makes sense that the warehouses have located near Rickenbacker. It's the cargo air hub. It's outside the city, of cheap land near a highway. But what would it take to get, say, a warehouse to locate on I-71 on the Near East Side? There's some vacant land there. I mean, what would it take? A lot of money, I'll bet.
Well, you know, I'll just jump in here. You know, when I was growing up, the JCPenney warehouse was the place to go. You know, the catalog center was right off of Bryce Road, right off of 70. It's still, I don't even know what's in there now, but I'm just saying there is space available close to COTA bus stops, and COTA, I think, is willing to have some discussions. I just think that we've got to disrupt the old way of thinking about where businesses go and what they look like. Businesses are really having a difficult time finding labor pools, and I think they're really willing to have a discussion about partnering in the transportation conversation as well.
But Michael, the data centers are being moved. They're out in Dublin, they're in New Albany, they're in Hilliard. The new warehouses are down in Grove, down in Obet's area. That message isn't getting through to them.
Well, I mean, some of it is, you know, the decision to build Interstate 270 was made in the 1950s. It opened in 1977, and there were articles that said Interstate 270 was the freeway to nowhere, and people joked about the fact that nobody was using it. This is all about choices. So the fact that certain warehouses and data centers have chosen to go to the locations that you just referenced, those were decisions that were made many years ago. And I think that we need to acknowledge it. Columbus wasn't always an automobile-oriented city, right? We had streetcars, we had a walkable city, we had transportation choice. But over the last half century, we made decisions, and those decisions tended to always favor the car. It's never too late, right?
That's right.
We have decisions we could be making every day. The question will be, what kind of decisions will we be making as a city tomorrow and in 5 years and 10 years that can change the course and make these connections easier for people?
But why do we need to have it's not only a transportation solution, it's not only a business location solution, it's also a housing solution, right?
Yes.
And so the idea of having affordable rental housing that's near these places in a variety of school districts and a variety of places. Now there's a big debate about that though, because people value community. And so they see it as, some people see it as destroying a community fabric. And the issue is that people don't really have a choice. Some people want to stay in that community, and some people don't. And there are no choices because we don't have a supply of affordable rental housing near these places.
Ellen, do you see a mixed neighborhood happening here in Columbus. I mean, we see this segregation of populations. In New York, it's so dense. You can't help but have people of different incomes living near each other. They're higher many times, but do you see Columbus, with the way it's laid out, being a truly economically segregated community in the near future?
I believe I read somewhere recently that Columbus is the number 2
Yeah,
That's right.
city in terms of segregation.
economic segregation. Yeah.
That's really concerning to me. And one of the things that we're working hard on in Wineland Park is how do we have a true mixed income neighborhood where we celebrate diversity, where there is equal access to information and jobs and opportunities. That, to me, is something that we're going to have to really pay attention to. How do we get equal access to the opportunities?
All right. It's not an easy solution. I don't know. We certainly didn't solve it in the last 30 minutes, but hopefully our work over the past week or so on WOSU has helped shed light on the issue and the many challenges it takes to help people reach financial security. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. All of our work from this project, Chasing the Dream, is at our website, wosu.org/Chasing the Dream. Please check it out. And because this story is not going away, we will continue to cover it, continue to add stories to that website. We want you to join the discussion. You can do that at our website, wosu.org. For our crew and for our panel here, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.